What if the man who promised to restore medical freedom just declared war on doctors? That's exactly what happened this week, and the method he chose reveals something disturbing about power. Before we unpack this medical power grab, hit that like button and subscribe for more analysis that cuts through the political theater. December 19th, a Thursday that changed everything. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. stood behind a podium at Health and Human Services headquarters. The man who built his career fighting government overreach was about to become its newest enforcer. But here's what the media isn't telling you about that press conference. Kennedy wasn't alone. Standing beside him was Dr. Mehmet Oz, the Medicare and Medicaid administrator. Two household names, two men with massive platforms, both about to announce something that would fundamentally alter American healthcare. This is not medicine, Kennedy declared. It is malpractice. Those aren't the words of a health freedom advocate. Those are the words of a federal bureaucrat deciding what doctors can and cannot do. The announcement was simple in its brutality. Any hospital providing gender-affirming care to minors would lose all Medicare and Medicaid funding, not just for those specific treatments. For everything. Think about what that means for a moment. Medicare and Medicaid represent nearly half of all hospital revenue in America. Kennedy and Oz just weaponized that dependency to enforce their medical ideology on every hospital in the country. This isn't about transgender rights. This is about federal control over medical practice. And the irony is breathtaking. RFK Jr. spent decades fighting pharmaceutical companies for their overreach. He built his reputation on opposing government interference in medical decisions. He championed parental choice and doctor-patient autonomy. Now he's using the federal government to override both. The policy mechanics reveal the true scope of this power grab. It's not just about hormone therapy or puberty blockers. Any hospital that provides any form of gender-affirming care to anyone under 18 loses all federal funding. That means hospitals in liberal states like California and New York face an impossible choice: follow federal ideology or close their doors. But here's where it gets really interesting. This isn't just about medical policy. It's about political theater starring two of the most recognizable faces in American media. Kennedy and Oz didn't choose this timing by accident. They announced their medical mandate while Congress was in Christmas recess. While Americans were distracted by holiday shopping and year-end news cycles, classic Washington power move, maximum policy impact, minimum political scrutiny. The enforcement mechanism is particularly clever. Rather than banning treatments outright, they're using financial leverage. It's the same playbook the federal government used to enforce the 55-mile-per-hour speed limit in the 1970s. No federal highways funding unless you comply. But this goes further. This targets the core revenue streams that keep hospitals operational. Dr. Oz, standing next to Kennedy, delivered the technical details with television-trained precision. Medical professionals providing these procedures are out of compliance with recognized standards of care. That's a remarkable statement from a man who spent years promoting questionable medical advice on daytime television. Now he's the arbiter of medical standards for the entire country. The timing creates another layer of irony. This announcement came just one day after House Republicans passed a healthcare package that didn't extend Affordable Care Act subsidies. Millions of Americans are about to see their insurance premiums spike. So while ordinary Americans face healthcare affordability crises, Kennedy and Oz are focused on ideological purity tests for hospitals. The medical establishment pushed back immediately. The American Academy of Pediatrics called the policy a baseless intrusion into the patient-physician relationship. Major medical associations condemned the federal overreach. But here's what's really happening behind the scenes. Hospital administrators across the country are already doing the math. Is serving transgender youth worth losing half their revenue? Most will choose financial survival over principle. That's exactly what Kennedy and Oz are counting on. The policy reveals something deeper about how power actually works in Washington. You don't need to pass laws through Congress. You don't need public debate or Democratic input. You just need control over federal funding. Kennedy and Oz are using the same regulatory apparatus that Kennedy once opposed, the same federal bureaucracy he spent his career criticizing, the same government overreach he built his reputation fighting. But when you're the one wielding the power, those principles suddenly become flexible. This transformation didn't happen overnight. Kennedy's journey from outsider activist to federal enforcer tells a larger story about American politics. It's the story of how anti-establishment figures become the establishment they once opposed. Remember Kennedy's 2023 presidential campaign? He positioned himself as the candidate of medical freedom. He criticized COVID vaccine mandates. He opposed government interference in healthcare decisions. He promised to restore patient autonomy and parental rights. Fast forward 18 months, he's now using federal power to override both. The policy also reveals the hollow nature of Republican federalism rhetoric. For decades, conservatives claimed to support states' rights and local control. They opposed federal mandates and bureaucratic overreach. But when federal power serves their ideological goals, those principles disappear. Kennedy's medical mandate applies equally to red states and blue states. It doesn't matter if a state legislature supports these treatments. It doesn't matter if local voters elected representatives who favor medical choice. Federal ideology trumps local democracy. The American Civil Liberties Union has already announced plans to sue. Other legal challenges are inevitable, but court cases take months or years. Hospital funding decisions happen now. That's the genius of using financial leverage over regulatory prohibition. The compliance pressure is immediate. The legal resistance is delayed. Dr. Marty Makary, the FDA administrator, was also present at the press conference. He announced warning letters for companies that manufacture chest binders and market them to young people. 3 different federal agencies, 3 different enforcement mechanisms, 1 coordinated assault on medical practice autonomy. This wasn't a policy announcement. It was a demonstration of federal power. Kennedy's transformation from health freedom advocate to medical enforcer perfectly captures the current moment in American politics. Outsider rhetoric meets insider power, anti-establishment credentials deployed for establishment control. It's not about consistency anymore. It's about winning. The broader implications extend far beyond transgender healthcare. If the federal government can use funding to dictate medical practice on one issue, why not others? What stops future administrations from targeting different treatments, different conditions, different ideologies? Kennedy and Oz just created a precedent that any future administration can exploit. Today, it's gender-affirming care. Tomorrow, it could be reproductive health, mental health treatment, or any medical practice that conflicts with political ideology. That should concern anyone who believes in limited government, medical freedom, or federalism, regardless of how you feel about transgender issues. The proposed rules will enter a 60-day comment period before taking effect. But the announcement alone sends a clear message to hospitals: comply or face financial ruin. Some hospitals are already suspending programs. Others are consulting lawyers. All are recalculating their revenue projections. The chilling effect is immediate and intentional, but there's another dimension to this story that reveals even more about how modern political power operates. Kennedy and Oz chose to make their announcement with full media production value, professional lighting, multiple camera angles, coordinated talking points. This wasn't a bureaucratic policy change. This was a television event designed to project federal authority. The symbolism was carefully orchestrated. Kennedy, the health freedom icon, standing next to Oz, the television doctor, both now wielding federal power to override medical professionals they've never met, treating patients they'll never see. The message was clear: celebrity trumps expertise, political loyalty supersedes medical training, federal ideology overrides local knowledge. And that message was broadcast to every hospital administrator in America. Consider the practical implications for a moment. A children's hospital in Boston that's treated transgender youth for years now faces an impossible choice: continue providing care they believe is medically necessary, or maintain the federal funding that keeps their cancer ward operational. That's not medical policy, that's medical extortion. The policy also creates perverse incentives throughout the healthcare system. Hospitals will now screen patients not just for medical need, but for political risk. Administrative staff will become ideological enforcers. Medical records will become potential liability. Healthcare becomes politics by other means. Kennedy's personal transformation tells a larger story about power in America. The same man who wrote books criticizing government capture of regulatory agencies just demonstrated how that capture actually works. You don't need to eliminate the agencies, you just need to control them. The pharmaceutical industry Kennedy spent decades fighting must be watching this with particular interest. If federal power can override medical practice for ideological reasons, what stops future administrations from targeting other treatments, other conditions, other medical decisions? Kennedy and Oz just normalized the politicization of healthcare. Today's ideological target becomes tomorrow's precedent. The enforcement timeline reveals the administrative sophistication behind this policy. The rules won't take effect for 60 days, giving hospitals time to adjust. But the announcement creates immediate compliance pressure. Smart hospitals will start changing practices now rather than risk future audits. Others will wait and hope for legal intervention. All will factor political considerations into medical decisions. That's exactly what Kennedy and Oz intended. The congressional response has been predictably partisan. Republicans praise the move as protecting children. Democrats condemn it as federal overreach. Neither side acknowledges the broader precedent being set. But precedents matter in Washington. Today's exceptional policy becomes tomorrow's standard practice. Kennedy and Oz just showed future administrations exactly how to use federal funding to enforce ideological compliance. The template is now established. The machinery is in place. The only question is which ideology gets enforced next. And that should terrify anyone who believes healthcare decisions should be made made by doctors, patients, and families rather than federal bureaucrats seeking television-friendly moments of power projection. The real story isn't about transgender rights or children's health care. It's about how political power works when principles meet opportunity. It's about how anti-establishment figures become the establishment they once fought. And it's about how federal funding becomes federal control when wielded by people willing to abandon their stated principles for political victory. In this case, opportunity won, principles lost, and American healthcare became more centralized, more politicized, and less free. That's the real legacy of Kennedy and Oz's medical mandate. Not protecting children, but expanding federal power over medical practice. Not restoring health freedom, but restricting it. Sometimes the most dangerous authoritarians are the ones who claim to oppose authoritarianism. If this analysis showed you something the mainstream media missed, make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell. Because understanding how power really works matters more than the theater they want you to see. See you in the next one.